So that's not really clean. That's not real easy to follow. And that's going to make testing a pain in the butt. However, it gets worse. So once we get into our main, we then have to instantiate our class so that we can actually run it. And example one doesn't really tell us what this program does. Example one is just an example. Example of what? So that's very unclear. We then see that we're creating two method variables for float, and we are doing some type of parsing float, and we're taking the arguments that are coming into the application. So this right here tells me that, oh, so apparently I'm supposed to be getting some arguments, but there's no documentation telling me what these arguments are or what this application is supposed to be getting. So very unclear. So really, I don't know what this is supposed to do yet. And then the second one, we're parsing a second. So this one here says, okay, we're going to parse the first parameter that's passed in. And this here says we're going to pass the third parameter that's passed in. But what the heck is the middle parameter? Well, we have this switch case here that looks to do something with the second argument. And if we look, we see that, oh, well, the second argument apparently is going to be either plus, minus, divide, or asterisk. And then based on those strings, we are going to call the corresponding method based on these strings. If we don't receive one of these, we basically say not a valid function. Okay, kind of figuring out what's going on, but it's not easy. So we've already spent a couple minutes just trying to understand what's going on, but it's not clear. So let me start by telling you what this program is. So from a high level perspective, this program is actually the basic structure of a calculator application. So if we actually did our due diligence and we have our documentation, we can create some Java docs here that will explain what this class, what this program is supposed to be. So this is going to be a calculator application. And it is going to have functions to simulate a calculator, to simulate buttons on a calculator. All right, so right off the bat, this now makes it a little bit cleaner that we at least now know what this application is. We can add things like the author. Okay, who wrote this? Well, I wrote this, Michael. And we should really add some additional things. So in Java, with Java docs, you can just do the asterisk, and you have all these different annotations that you can add to your documentation so that when you generate the nice pretty HTML, you're going to actually see this highlighted or defined. So we can do things like API notes. If this is API, we have author, category. Is this method deprecated? Meaning, is it about to go away, not used anymore? We want to hide this. We could do since, which since is interesting because since we can say, okay, when was this implemented? So we could say this was implemented on August 6th, 2022. And we can also add, so we have since, we can also add version. So we could say version 0 or version 1. So when we make changes to this, we can update this information and we know what happens. So you could actually keep it like this, or you can make modifications and say, okay, modified on 8.7 and add the additional information. Now, in the old days, I mean, back in mainframe days, when you were dealing with like COBOL, again, some of the older naming conventions, but Cold Fusion, COBOL, BASIC, things like that back on old mainframes, you had to actually write not just formatted code, but you had to actually write code that was fixed length and style. So you didn't have this pretty, you had, it had to be so many tabs, so many spaces, everything had to line up. You then had to also include all this information at the top. So documentation was hardcore back in the old days. because if we didn't, we had no idea what was going on. All right, so we have our high level documentation. Okay, so it's a calculator application. We have functions to simulate buttons on a calculator. I am the author. I created it on age 6, and we're dealing with version 1. Okay, so we now have a class document. We have a program document telling us what this is supposed to do. The next thing we need to do is we probably need to rename this class or rename this program to actually explain what it is that we are doing, what its function really is. Because example 1 really doesn't tell us anything. So to be a good coder and to write good readable code, everything in our code should explain what it is that it's doing. So here, instead of example 1, this should be calculator application. Now, it's telling me, okay, you've renamed this, but in Java standards, you have to, your class name has to match your file name. So because we're in Eclipse, it's very easy. All we have to do is click the rename feature here, and it's going to do the work for us. So now we have calculator app matches calculator app. So now let's kind of walk through the application a little bit. So we have this first method here. Now this first method is actually a method that is going to add two numbers together. And here, this is actually going to simulate the plus on a calculator. And so method 1 really should be add. Float should be left number. Or we could just say, start with this. So number 1, number 2. XY still work, but we want to be a little cleaner. We want to make this as clean as possible. So you have add number 1, number 2. Now, add, well, it's succinct, really still does not explain the functionality of this method. We want to be as clear and concise as possible. So for good readable code, it should be add two numbers together, return sum. So add two numbers together, we could say return sum, or add two numbers together, return value. So add two numbers together, return result. There we go. All right, so now we have number 1, number 2. So really we can make this a little bit better. So left number, right number, and why I'm being this anal about naming, it makes sense when we get down to some of the other methods. All right, so we simulate the plus on a calculator, we add two numbers together. So really add two numbers, result, returns result. So here in Java, we could also do, Java doc. So we can add here and we can add return. And we're going to return a float. This is the result of adding left number to right number. All right, so adding two numbers together. So now we need to update our return statement. So return left number plus right number. Now, depending upon your coding style, this is a very simplistic view of coding. Now, you could bloat this up just a little bit, which makes it a little more readable, but you don't necessarily have to do it. It's just depending upon your coding style or the coding parameters that are required or coding standards. So another way to do this is you could do float sum equals left number plus right number, and then return sum. Now, if we want to follow the naming convention, we can just say results, and then we could say return results. So just by renaming our code, we now understand exactly what's going on. So this first method is supposed to simulate the plus on the calculator, which adds two numbers together. And a return is going to be the float result of adding the left number to the right number. So now if we actually read the code, it almost reads exactly like our comment. So we say float, add two numbers, return result, float left number, float right number. We take the float results of left number plus right number, and we return the results. Now, if I actually were to remove this comment, we get the exact same readability from the code. So this is kind of what we call in software development as self-documenting code. If you clearly write readable code and follow good coding practices and styles, you can pretty much know what's going on in a function or in a piece of code just based on the code itself. But it is still helpful to add things like Java docs or class documentation. All right, so let's do the next one here. So I will take this piece here just to cut down on code. So this one here, we want to simulate the subtraction on a calculator. So here we're going to subtract two numbers. And we are going to return the float result of subtracting the left number from the right number. So this should actually, instead of being just method 2, should be subtract two numbers, return result. Again, left number, right number. Now, one additional piece of documentation you could add to this method is, if people don't understand math, which there are people out there, is if the left number, or I'm sorry, if the right number is greater than the left number, we will get a negative, or we should get a negative number. So this is just a rule, a subtraction rule. All right, so float results, left number, right number. So we subtract two numbers, return results. So let's do the same thing we did before. So we'll do float results equals x minus y, return results. But wait, x minus y doesn't exist. It needs to be left number, right number. All right, let's read this. So subtract two numbers. We'll receive left number and right number. Our result is going to be the subtraction of left number minus right number. So simulate the minus on the calculator, subtract two numbers. Float returns results of subtracting left number from right number. Okay. Makes sense so far. All right, so method 3. So we now want to simulate the division on a calculator. Now, this is not to be confused with div. So in Java, we have a div method, or a div property, which is the remainder of a division, not the division itself. So here we want to divide two numbers. And there is a division rule. And our division rule, we cannot divide by 0. This will return, this is bad. So this returns not a number. All right, so our float results of dividing left number from right number. So again, we should make something a little more distinct for our naming. So float, change this to divide. Two numbers, left and right. And we'll return results. And let's do method 4. So now we want to simulate the multiplication on a calculator. And here we're going to multiply two numbers. Don't need a rule for that. And float result of multiplying left number to right number. So we need to change method 4 to be multiply two numbers, return results. And we want to change our X and Y to left and right number. And instead divide, we will multiply. All right, so far so good. We understand now that we have a calculator application. We're simulating the buttons on a calculator. So calculator application is the name of our program. We have 4 methods for adding two numbers, dividing two numbers, multiplying two numbers, and subtracting two numbers. And these return results. All right. Last and not least, we have our main. So this is pretty much just the main main method. So this is what runs our code. All right. So first things first, we need to change, or we need to basically tell the end user what parameters this application requires. So really, we need to make sure that if there are no arguments, we need to check for that. So main method runs code. But here we actually do need some Java docs. So here we have arguments. So parameter arg 0 is going to be the left number. We have argument 1 and argument 2. Argument 1 is going to be our calculator button value plus, minus, divide, multiply. Our application is going to, so our application is going to accept 3 values simulating two numbers and a math symbol being entered into a calculator. For example, left number plus right number, etc. But for readability, let's just do all of it. We have left number plus, minus, divide, and multiply. So now we know what our main method is supposed to do. So we are expecting 3 values. So if we don't get these 3 values, we're going to fail. So first thing this program actually needs to do is we need to add an additional condition. So we need to say if args not equal args equal null, or args dot length is less than 3, less than or equal to 3. No, less than 3. Yeah, that's right. Add my curly braces for readability. We can do this out. And what we want to say is we want to say our calculator app. So in Java, this is kind of expected formatting. So we can do calculator app. We say required, or calculator app requires left number, operation, right number.